In the name of human insight, or in the name of God, or in the name of love. I am B.RAHIMIAN as a JKD researcher or philosophy of Bruce Lee, or human insight. Hi everyone, I hope that you are all be well or okay or has a calm, and especially 2 days as a coronavirus as a degrees, 4th degrees, and I think myself that is not coronavirus, that is a especially politics of governments or third world war. Yes, this is it, behind the world, third world war. Because the China mafia or government, on the other hand, who persons who or organizations who killed the Bruce Lee or somebody like him, and other big other governments together as a behind the world, mafia behind the world, and produce these viruses to make their property, just their property and power. Yes, this is the truth. And I want to take another part. This clips includes historical of Persia or Iran as a call today, Iran, yes, and on the other hand, Iranian people, history as a culture, yes, and from Bruce Lee's vision or human insight vision, yes, and this is the part 1 from these researchers of human insight group and with me, yes, and this that includes 3 parts or 4 parts, yes, and this is part 1, emergence of Iran or Persia, or history of Persia or Iran. And once upon a time on the earth, yes, it goes back to the over 5,000 years ago, before Christian year or birth of Jesus, yes. And at that time there is no religions like today's, as a for example Jewish or Christian or Islam or other or Buddha and other religions, yes, at that time. And the historical of Persia or Iran includes 3 parts, yes. Iran's history divided into 2 parts of Iranian history before Islam and Iranian history after Islam, which are divided into smaller parts, yes, and that is before Iranian Islam, that includes 3 parts, yes, that includes 3 parts, and part 1 before Aryans as an immigration to this land as a Persia land at that time, and part 2 about that immigration Aryans to this part, this land Persia, and part 3 about I think about researcher ancient Persia or ancient ancient Iran. Yes. This history or story, the story of Persia, started before Aryans nation. Yes, different nation in the different parts of Persia. They have lived in the Iran or Persia land, and in the history of Iran before Aryans, there were some, for example, traditions, special traditions in Sistan, for example, and traditions in Iran, and traditions in Europe. At that time, this called, at that time, I don't know exactly about the names of the, for example, towns at that time. And before everything, I tell the truth about the books has written as a historical of Iran, further of the books the books, or for example movie that you watched or read it, and has been distortion. Yes, this is treatment. Everything, for example, like Bruce Lee's movie watching, or every movie as a for example reality, yes, as a documentary of for example everything, yes. And but for example in historical of Iran, for example, as has been write for by writer is distortion, for example, that has written about for example history as a years, for example, and it starts for example history 600 before Christian, but on the other hand we have some documents or further of the as a nations, Asians, yes, Asians organizations that try to get a treatment of a historical of, for example, Iran over than 5,000 years. Yes, and the Persia land is a, for example, one of the biggest land on the earth. It's the biggest land. Yes, the biggest land on the earth. Yes, and that has been over 5,000 years ago. Yes, this is a long time ago on the earth. This is amazing, very amazing. And at that time, before Cyrus, great Cyrus, you know great Cyrus, haven't you heard about this king, this empire? This is the biggest empire on the earth. Yes, as a reality of history. Yes, and before Cyrus, Aryans lived another land, not Aryans. Yes, and as a race, Aryans moved to this land. Yes, especially moving Aryan nations in this land, and that they have been made. Yes, they have made especially for example, area, a special area in Persia, and at that time, and they had been living with love together, and further of them had been farmers. Yes, that is true, man. Farmers. Yes, further of the Iranian people at that time had been farmers, and they lived together very calm and with love. Yes, and after that that is, for example, immigration of Aryans to Iran. After immigration, Elam government, one of the biggest government of historical of Iran, Elam government, which they land in south of Iran, and for example, Elam, Elam was Shush. Yes, Shush, Babel, and other cities of Persia land. Yes, and I want to talk about the great Cyrus, and maybe you ask a question, if there is no, for example, if there was no religions at that time, then what was that religion? What was their religion? Yes, this is a main question. If you ask me, for example, yes. And what is the religion? And when you know, for example, the word of religion, the meaning, real meaning of the religion word, as a Krishnamurti said, Jiddu Krishnamurti, the master of Russia, as a philosopher, one of the biggest philosophers on the earth. Religion. What is the religion? And how can make the religion? How can we make the religion? Yes, religion is the, for example, traditions like and behavior, or with some, for example, thinking about how you, for example, control others, how you can control others, by what, by how, yes, how, and religions like, for example, habits, or for example, addictions. Yes, addiction. For example, I have a special religion. For example, I am living to a special land. For example, that has people. These people of this land, for example, they want to have a big, for example, big mosque, for example, they want to have a big, like monkey, for example, big, not monkey, and we have a special word of this. For example, they want to have a mosque, big mosque, and I have biggest mosque at that time. I have biggest mosque. And when I have biggest mosque in this land between these people, and I can say I am a messenger. I have a message from, for example, the God. Yes, at that time I can control others, and I have a very especially living, especially living, and other services. I have a services from these people. This is a kind of, for example, relation. Yes, and it goes back. It's better. It goes back to the great Cyrus king. Yes, and the great Cyrus at the during the for example great Cyrus, or Cyrus of great king, as a king of Persia, and they have a, for example, especially notes. Yes, especially quotes and notes for the people as a justice, very justice. And at that time, one of the people that had been living as a Zoroaster in Persian or Farsi, Zartosht. Yes, one of the people had been living was Zoroaster. Zoroaster is not, for example, was not a messenger. Yes, and he had a special thinking. Yes, a special ideas like good behavior, good thinking, and good behavior, and good idea, like this. As just in 3 parts. Yes, the Zoroaster ideas has been 3 parts. Yes, and after Zoroaster, the religion has been, for example, Zoroastrians. Yes, Zoroastrians, and the great Cyrus at that time attacked to the other lands, and when he has, for example, success to the wars with, for example, another nations, and he didn't any, for example, high treason, for example, or any bad behavior to he did not any bad behavior, any bad, for example, bad thinking, just bad thinking to the people of their land. Yes, or these lands, and he chose a person for example, leading that peoples. Yes, every land. Yes, and after that, after this time, Iran or Persia at that time, they called Persia is better, Persia, and the biggest land on the earth. The Persia land, as a historian researchers gets from historian researchers, and over for example 40% of the earth land, the land of earth. Yes, over 40% of earth. and the biggest empire in the world. Yes, this is a part 1 as a Cyrus, Great Cyrus, or historical of Persia, and or emergence of Iran or Persia from Bruce Lee's vision. Thank you very much for your listening to me as a babak, and we can result from our past, our culture. Yes. Thank you, and so until next session.